Right now, in the Middle East, an unusually large-scale movement of troops has begun, and it's not just American forces. On one hand, a United States Navy carrier strike group led by the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln has entered the area of responsibility of United States Central Command in the Indian Ocean. This means that this carrier strike group is already off the coast of Iran and is aiming its missiles at it. In addition, it is reported that 2 more United States Navy carrier groups are entering the area, and additional terminal high-altitude area defense missile defense systems are being brought into the region. This suggests that a new strike on Iran is getting closer, and at the same time, and this is from another direction, Russia has unexpectedly begun the emergency withdrawal of its troops from Qamishli airport in northeastern Syria, which could bring an end to its presence in this region. Some of the troops are being transferred to Qamishli in the west of the country, but most are fleeing straight to Russia. In this episode, we will talk about what is happening in the region right now. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic, but first, please subscribe, like this episode, and leave a comment below. This really helps a lot in promoting the content on YouTube, and I would be very grateful for it. In addition, subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link is in the description to this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, Reuters, citing 5 independent sources in Damascus, confirmed that after a successful operation by Syrian government forces, Russia began an emergency withdrawal of troops from a key base in northeastern Syria from Qamishli airport. For those who don't know, let me explain. Since 2019, Qamishli has been Moscow's main outpost for controlling Kurdish territories and oil fields. And now, heavy equipment and weapons are being urgently loaded onto transport planes and moved to the Qamishli base. That's in western Syria, or even back to Russia. And it's important to note here that this is not a planned rotation, this is a strategic withdrawal from this area of Syria. And against this backdrop, while the Kremlin is hastily loading up its troops and pulling them out of Syria, Donald Trump, on the contrary, is moving carrier strike groups to the shores of Iran and threatening Tehran with Tomahawk missiles. That's why in this episode we'll briefly but very thoroughly break down why Vladimir Putin is losing influence in Syria. How the new government of Bashar is politely, asking the Russians to leave, and why Trump chose this particular moment to prepare an attack on Iran. Why are the Russians now fleeing from Qamishli altogether? Let's lay out the facts here. The Russian military contingent had been stationed at the Qamishli airport in the northeast of the country for 7 years. They acted as a sort of mediator between the Kurds and the authorities in Damascus. Moreover, the Russians appointed themselves as this mediator, because the Kremlin clearly supported Bashar al-Assad, yet also claimed to prevent clashes between Assad's forces and the Kurds. And so, they controlled this mediation. But add to that the American military presence in Syria as well. For example, the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, they were the main partners of the United States in the ground fight against Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. However, the United States has repeatedly limited its support for the Kurds, trying to avoid a conflict with Turkey, which still considers the Kurdish groups a threat to its country. And by 2026, United States' influence over Kurdish autonomy in Syria has weakened significantly, and they are now focused on integrating the Kurds into the new Syrian state. Now, you must integrate into the new country instead of being a separate force. But until that moment, Russia still held an intermediate position in the relations between Damascus and the Kurds. Over the past year, the situation changed dramatically. In Syria, Ahmed Ashra replaced Bashar Assad as the leader. At first, he promised Moscow continuity, meaning he promised that he wouldn't oppose the continued Russian presence in Syria. But suddenly, on January 21 in Damascus, through unofficial channels, it was stated to the Russian military that there was nothing more for them to do in Qamishli. Why is that? The thing is, this month the Syrian government forces captured huge territories that were previously controlled by the same Kurds. Now that Damascus is taking control of the border itself, it no longer needs any Russian mediation, and overall Damascus has taken control of these territories. The new Syrian authorities are actually on very friendly terms with Turkey, so the question is, why are the Russians even there? There's no need for mediation or anything else. Moreover, Moscow has also lost its role as an arbitrator, because Moscow was unable to protect the Kurds on one hand, and couldn't reach an agreement with Turkey. In short, that's why the Syrians told the Russians to leave. They simply packed up and left Qamishli. And notice, Russian propagandists from the Kremlin, of course, don't talk about it this way. The Russian information space is completely silent about it. That Russians are being swept out of Syria, and they're acting like nothing is happening. And now it's known for sure that Russian equipment and heavy weapons have been moved to Qamishli in western Syria over the past 2 days, but most of the contingent is officially returning to Russia. Russian marked planes remain at Qamishli airfield, but the process is now irreversible. And here I should note that experts from the Institute for the Study of War in Washington predicted back in December 2025 that Russia would be forced to wind down its presence in northern Syria due to Turkey's unwillingness and the new Syrian authorities' refusal to tolerate any foreign presence in areas of their interest. The Russians there were used by them and are now being discarded. Putin simply can't keep holding this front forever when the economy inside Russia is cracking under the weight of sanctions. Now let's connect this with what's happening just across the border, while Russia is packing its bags in Qamishli. Donald Trump has moved on to open threats against Tehran. In mid-January, as you know, Donald Trump had already given the order to prepare for a devastating Tomahawk missile strike on Iran's military facilities. Let me quote an old statement from Trump. I said if they execute protesters and hang innocent people, we will strike them very hard. We will not stand by and watch. Now, Trump is being criticized for abandoning the protesters, and sadly many Iranians died in these protests. Trump promised them help, but it never came in time. Although in the last few days, he really did temporarily slow down the attack. Because, as he claims, executions in Iran have supposedly stopped. Nevertheless, the United States carrier group is already in the Persian Gulf. For Donald Trump, Iran is probably the main target for 2026. Well, it might compete with Greenland. Trump still aims to finish what he began in his first term, the total strangulation of the Ayatollah regime. And the withdrawal of Russian troops from Qamishli plays into his hands, because Moscow is no longer an active player on the ground in that part of Syria through which Iran was pumping weapons to Hezbollah. And this is another interesting story, another reason why Donald Trump's administration has been turning a blind eye for the past month to the fact that Syrian President Ashraf's forces have been pushing out the Kurds. And although, well, the United States authorities have always supported these Kurds, in the past month, it's all been looked at through fingers, so to speak. This explains why, because Russia needed to be pushed out of this region, out of Qamishli, in order to block this supply bridge of weapons to Hezbollah. The connection here is direct. Trump sees Russia's weakness and its withdrawal from key points in the Middle East. He sees this as a sign that Iran's regional cover is collapsing. The United States is building up military assets, giving Donald Trump the opportunity to strike at any moment. That's why we're now seeing the so-called power vacuum. Russia is leaving, Iran is becoming isolated, and its proxy forces are falling apart. Trump is still keeping his hand on the button. No one knows when he'll press it, but he might. As a result, Russia no longer has any say in Syria. It's nobody there now. It's pulling back to its two bases, Qamishli and Tartus, hoping to at least keep those. But Ash-Shara has already shown he's willing to give ultimatums and suggests the Russians will eventually have to leave even there. For us, this means security in the region now depends entirely on whether Trump will make that final move against Iran. Putin can't help anymore if Trump attacks Iran. Well, Russia will most likely just stay on the sidelines, at least keeping their coastal bases. They definitely won't get involved in Syria, because they understand that their presence in Qamishli and Tartus is very precarious, and they know that if they try to interfere in the situation with Iran, they'll be kicked out of Syria immediately, for good. So, the era of Russian dominance in Syria has, well, officially, you could say, come to an end. I'll leave it at that, friends. If you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support our work with your donation or subscription using the links and details provided. In the description of this video, it says support the channel. Choose any format that's convenient for you. I appreciate any support. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.